Good afternoon, criminal files, and welcome back to another episode of Homicide Cases. I'm your host, Misfit, and today I will be opening the file on Howard Allen, an American serial killer with 3 known victims. Howard Allen's early life was marked by significant hardship and social disadvantage. Raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, by an impoverished single mother, he was one of 8 children. This upbringing was characterized by a lack of resources to the extent that Allen sometimes resorted to stealing food to help provide for his family. His difficult socioeconomic background provides important context for understanding the circumstances in which his criminal behavior emerged. A central and contentious theme throughout Allen's legal saga was the question of his mental capacity. The evidence on this matter is deeply conflicting, pointing to a complex individual with significant cognitive struggles despite what some consider to be average intelligence. As a child, Allen was placed in special education classes for mentally disabled children and had a reading level equivalent to a second grader when he left elementary school. A special education director who worked with him provided a professional assessment stating that Allen had difficulty processing language and that his thinking and decision making would be very concrete. This professional stated that such a cognitive profile would render him easily led and challenge his ability to fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. However, this narrative was complicated by counter-arguments presented during his legal proceedings. A specific IQ test reportedly yielded a score of 104, a result that falls within the range of average intelligence. Furthermore, Allen's own mother described him as an average student, and none of the 18 individuals who submitted letters on his behalf during sentencing described him as having anything other than normal intelligence. The contradictory data regarding his mental capacity is not a simple factual inconsistency. It is the core of his case's legal and psychological complexity. The professional's assessment that Allen's thinking was very concrete and that he had difficulty with abstract concepts like consequences could offer a compelling explanation for his criminal behavior. It could explain the apparent lack of foresight in his crimes, such as the irrational decision to leave a slip of paper with his own name and phone number on it at the homicide scene. This cognitive profile suggests that his violent acts were not premeditated or part of a sophisticated criminal plan, but rather impulsive, reactive behaviors by an individual with impaired judgment. This perspective elevates the understanding of his case from a simple chronology of events to a nuanced criminological analysis of the relationship between cognitive deficits and criminal violence. The first confirmed homicide committed by Allen occurred in August 1974 when he assaulted 85-year-old Opal Cooper and took her life during a burglary. For this crime, he was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and received a 21-year prison sentence. After serving 11 years of this term, he was released on parole in 1985. This initial offense set a grim precedent for the violence that would follow, demonstrating a tendency to use lethal force in the commission of a property crime. Following his release, Allen's violence escalated with two additional homicides in a single year. On May 18, 1987, he attacked and took the life of 87-year-old Laverne Hale in her Indianapolis home during a robbery. An investigation revealed that Hale had been bludgeoned and reportedly beaten, with the police believing the murder weapon was a 2-pound bust removed from her living room shelf. Less than 2 months later, on July 14, 1987, Allen took the life of 74-year-old Ernestine Griffin in her Indianapolis home. The events leading to this crime began the day before when Allen, posing as a potential car buyer, had a conversation with Griffin about a vehicle belonging to her neighbor, Dr. Victor Seaman. This ruse gained him access to her home. The crime scene showed signs of a violent robbery, with Griffin's body discovered on her living room floor with signs of both blunt force trauma to the head and a knife wound in her chest. Her wallet, a camera, and a battery charger were stolen. A consistent and identifiable pattern of victimology and modus operandi emerges from Allen's crimes. All three of his confirmed victims were elderly individuals, making them physically vulnerable targets. His MO consistently involved a burglary or home invasion that escalated into lethal violence. The violence used, beating with a blunt object and a knife attack, was excessive, gone far beyond what would be required to subdue a victim and suggesting an underlying rage or impulsivity beyond simple financial motivation. Comparing Allen's profile to other notable Indiana serial killers from the same era is essential to fully grasp his unique criminal disposition. For example, Herb Baumeister and Larry Eyler operated differently. They targeted specific demographics such as young gay men and boys, and their MO was distinct, often involving strangulation and the dumping of bodies near highways. Orville Lynn Majors, another killer from Indiana, was a healthcare angel of death who took the life of patients under his care. In contrast to these profiles, Allen's MO was not driven by sexual sadism or a specific demographic fetish, but rather by an opportunistic, predatory violence that was triggered during the commission of a property crime. He preyed on the physically weak for financial gain, with the violence appearing to be a reactive, spontaneous consequence of the initial act of burglary. This places him in a distinct category within the context of Indiana's criminal history and provides a deeper understanding of his opportunistic and impulsive criminal profile. The investigation that led to Allen's capture in August 1987 was a masterclass in classic meticulous police work. The breakthrough in the Ernestine Griffin homicide case began when a neighbor, Dr. Victor Seaman, found Griffin's body in her home and contacted police. At the crime scene, investigators discovered a crucial piece of evidence on a kitchen counter, a slip of paper with Howard Allen, 545-4109, written on it. The police were able to identify the individual to whom this phone number belonged. This lead was validated by a neighbor who informed police that Allen had spoken to Griffin about a car she had for sale, which belonged to Dr. Seaman. This established Allen's presence at the scene and a clear connection to the victim. The investigation then broadened to his place of employment, a car wash, where police located Griffin's stolen camera. Allen had given the camera to a co-worker to hold in his locker on the day of the homicide. In addition, a telephone lineman later found Griffin's empty wallet on a nearby roof. The final and perhaps most damning piece of physical evidence was the discovery of blood stains on the clothes Allen was wearing when he was arrested. Laboratory analysis of these stains matched Griffin's blood type, which was different from Allen's own. Based on this compelling chain of evidence, Allen was taken in for questioning. Initially, police did not disclose the nature of the crime under investigation. However, upon learning that investigators had found the incriminating note at the crime scene, he was formally arrested and given his Miranda warnings, which he signed a waiver for. During a later interview, Allen admitted to striking Griffin in the face but maintained his denial of killing her. Allen's case exemplifies the power of a thorough and traditional police investigation. In an era dominated by advanced forensic science, the evidence against him was built on a series of foundational yet undeniable links: a handwritten note with his name, a stolen item recovered from his workplace, and blood on his clothing. The discovery of the camera in his co-worker's locker in particular illustrates the importance of canvassing and follow-up, which proved critical in establishing a direct link between Allen and the crime. The collective weight of this circumstantial evidence, built through patient and meticulous police work, was sufficient to secure his conviction. The progression of the investigation from a single piece of paper to a trail of physical and testimonial evidence serves as a powerful case study in the efficacy of classical law enforcement methods. On June 11, 1988, Howard Allen was sentenced to death for the homicide of Ernestine Griffin. This sentence was the culmination of a trial where a jury found him guilty of homicide, felony homicide, and robbery. He was given a concurrent 50-year sentence for robbery and a consecutive 38-year sentence for theft. He was formally placed on death row on August 30th, 1988, where he would spend the next 25 years. The initial conviction and death sentence were not the final word. Allen's case entered a prolonged period of appeals. On direct appeal, the Indiana Supreme Court upheld his conviction and death sentence in 1997. This appeal addressed a range of issues, including the validity of his waiver of Miranda rights and the effectiveness of his trial counsel. Following this, Allen sought to have his conviction and sentence set aside by filing a petition for post-conviction relief, which was also denied by the state courts. A significant legal argument raised by Allen's defense was a claim of juror misconduct. The defense contended that the conviction should be vacated because a juror had failed to disclose her criminal record on a questionnaire. However, the court rejected this claim. The post-conviction court found that the juror's arrests for alcohol-related offenses were too infrequent to suggest a type of pattern of alcohol-related misconduct that would have led his trial counsel to seek her exclusion. The court also noticed that it was plausible the juror, having been a defendant herself, might have had more empathy for Allen. This line of argument was ultimately unsuccessful in overturning the conviction. The most significant legal chapter of Allen's life was his multi-decade effort to challenge his death sentence on the grounds of mental disability. His defense team's repeated attempts to prove he was mentally disabled and thus ineligible for execution aligned with a major shift in capital punishment jurisprudence. The legal debate was fundamentally transformed by the U.S. Supreme Court's 2002 decision in Atkins v. Virginia, which held that executing mentally disabled individuals violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. Allen's case became a direct test of this evolving legal standard. Initially, the Indiana Supreme Court denied Allen's petition to litigate his claim of mental disability a second time, concluding that the issue had already been addressed in prior proceedings. However, this state-level denial set the stage for a federal court intervention. After years of legal maneuvering, a federal court ultimately agreed with Allen's argument, overturning his death sentence. The federal court's ruling led to Allen's resentencing. In 2012, his death penalty was commuted and he was resentenced to 60 years in prison for the homicide of Ernestine Griffin. Following this commutation, his projected release date was listed as April 23, 2035. He was imprisoned at the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, where he would serve the remainder of his life. Allen's legal journey is a powerful example of the dynamic nature of American jurisprudence, particularly concerning capital punishment. The case highlights a protracted and often confusing process of death penalty appeals, as well as the intricate interplay between state and federal court systems. The eventual overturning of his death sentence was not a function of new evidence of innocence, but rather a reevaluation of his case under a new legal and ethical framework. His case stands as a landmark example of how evolving societal values, as codified in Supreme Court decisions, can retroactively alter the legal fate of convicted individuals. For legal scholars and advocates, Allen's case remains a significant point of reference, demonstrating how a change in the interpretation of constitutional law can fundamentally impact the finality of a sentence. Following his resentencing in 2012, Allen was transferred from death row to the general prison population at the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility in Haddon Township, Indiana. This marked the end of his quarter-century wait for a ruling on death sentence. His life behind bars was defined by this long legal struggle, culminating in a commutation of his sentence, which allowed him to live out his remaining years in prison rather than face execution. Howard Arthur Allen died in prison on June 5, 2020, at the age of 71. His death was confirmed by the Indiana Department of Corrections, bringing a definitive end to his life and the legal saga that had unfolded over decades. He died having completed a portion of his commuted sentence, ensuring that he did not achieve his projected parole date of 2035. The case of Howard Allen offers a unique and multifaceted perspective on American criminal justice, blending elements of classic police procedure with a complex legal battle. His criminal profile is that of an opportunistic predator who targeted the elderly during burglaries, a distinct modus operandi that differentiates him from other well-known serial killers in Indiana who were driven by different motives and victim selection. The chain of evidence that led to his capture, a handwritten note, a stolen camera, and blood on his clothing, stands as a testament to the effectiveness of traditional on-the-ground police work. However, the most enduring legacy of his case is the profound legal precedent it helped to solidify. The decades-long fight to overturn his death sentence on the grounds of mental disability is a microcosm of the national debate surrounding capital punishment. Allen's struggle highlights the evolving standards of justice and the ethical questions surrounding the execution of individuals with cognitive impairments. His final resentencing was not a reevaluation of his guilt, but a reinterpretation of his eligibility for capital punishment under a new legal framework. In this regard, Howard Allen's case is a crucial study for legal scholars, criminologists, and sociologists alike. It illuminates the intersection of cognitive disability and criminal behavior, the nuances of law enforcement, and the non-static nature of legal and ethical norms. The resolution of his case, with his death in prison following the commutation of his death sentence, represents a final, sober conclusion to a life defined by violence and a legal journey that helped shape the modern application of capital punishment in the United States. I would like to apologize for this video coming out so late. I have been sick the past couple of weeks. And also, I hope you'll enjoy the new format I'm using. I would like to thank everyone for joining me as I close the file on Howard Allen. Join me next week when I open a file on Quincy Allen. This is Misfit signing off, and as always, stay safe.